Welcome or welcome back to Solidarity on the Bench, a podcast for 20-somethings by a 20-something. I'm your host, Katie Yu, and on this podcast, we talk about everything and anything with a focus on mental health and personal well-being. New episodes every Tuesday at 11 a.m. PST. All right, I am joined today with Megan, aka Miles with Megan. I will leave everything down below if you want to go check her out. But Megan, I'm so excited. I was thinking about how I can intro you. So I was like, okay, you're a mother, you're a college student, you're an ultra marathon racer starting in 2023, you started running, which is incredible. Now you're like ultra marathoning.
Yeah.
And you're just a very cool human being and now a podcaster as well. So,
Thank
Megan, thank you
you.
so much for coming on to the
Yeah, I'm super
podcast.
excited to be here.
So excited. So, I want to start everything with you just kind of chatting about who you are and what you do in the online space for anyone who may not know who you are.
Yeah, sure. So, like Katie already said, my name is Megan. I started my health and wellness Instagram account, I think back in 2021. My daughter had just turned 1, and I was kind of like enough postpartum that I was like, I need to kind of get moving again and find myself and take care of myself because that first year of taking care of a child, it's just all encompassing. You don't really do anything else. So I started my little, I think it was Healthy by Megan first.
Mhm.
I think that's what it was at first. And I just would go on walks a few times a week and was trying to drink more water. I thought putting lemon in my water was the epitome of health and wellness influencing.
I hear
Um,
that.
and after about 6 months, I started running. I had never really been a runner. I did like a season of cross country, but I quit because I hated running, which is valid. And so I got back into running, and yeah, at some point that just kind of took off. It's hard to pinpoint when I went from running a mile every day to running lots of miles, lots of days. But it just gave me an outlet. It gave me something to do for myself, and it was a very easy way to set goals. And then I ended up meeting tons of friends. That's how I met my boyfriend, and it kind of just took over my life, but in a really good way. I work with runners too. I work at a physical therapy office working with runners. And so pretty much all day, every day, running's running's on the
Wow.
brain, which is why I switched from Healthy by Megan to Miles with Megan because I was like, at this point, it's just running. I like
So,
to eat good food.
the second question I want to ask before we get into the discipline, the mindset, and the
Mhm.
exercise is in the name of solidarity on the bench, I want to prove to everyone that it's not weak to ask for help. Everyone around you is doing it. I had to do it very recently. And so I asked you, when was the last time you asked for help?
Well, honestly, with parenting, it's daily, it feels like, even with little things. But my boyfriend and I did have the conversation last night. We're trying to adjust. I have a daughter and he has 2 kids, and we're trying to learn how to navigate. It's very complicated. And so, stuff like dishes and stuff like that is
Mhm.
nitpicky. It doesn't really matter. But the one thing I did ask for in terms of for help is I just need help learning how to manage all these emotions when they come up. I don't want to feel like I have to go hide and
Mm,
deal with them myself and then talk. I want help finding better just responses to all of
mhm,
these complicated situations, whether that means I go to therapy or we go or I start journaling more often. I pretty much just admitted I'm having a hard time managing this adjustment and I need help, whether it's I need space or I need to talk. So we're just winging it, but yeah, asking for help is hard, but
I think
you
that's
really cannot
huge.
get by without it.
That is huge, and that's something that I was also kind of dealing with now that you bring it up. Right before I left for Cali, I was like, with my friends and the people that I'm really close with in California, they don't know me very well, right? Like, I just
Yeah.
moved, and so I'm really, really worried about being perceived as a human being with needs,
Yes, it's so
which is, like,
stressful.
so stupid. Like, it's actually,
Yeah.
like, of course everyone has needs, of course you're gonna need help sometimes, but I was like, the less space I take up, maybe the more they'll wanna
Yeah.
hang out with me. Like, if I'm not the bubbly,
You don't wanna be too
positive person,
much.
right, like, if I'm
Yeah.
not the person that you think you're friends with or, like, in a relationship with, like, I am so worried to show up and to be rejected and be like, "I need help," and then you'd be like, "Oh, but, like, you're not." And
Yeah.
it has never happened. Let's be so
Yeah,
clear.
right? It's
It
always
has
the
never
fear that doesn't
happened,
happen.
and when your friends come to you asking for help, the first thing you think is not, "Oh my god, they're a human with needs. I'm now gonna drop them from my life." Like,
Yeah,
you're like, "How can
exactly.
I help you?" So that is something that I was dealing with as well, just answering my own question of asking for help. So I really, really
Yeah.
relate to that of being like, I don't have a solution. I don't know what I need right now, but I want to tell you that I'm not doing okay. Like, I want to tell you that I'm struggling and I want to have you in my life. And I don't want to feel like I need to hide this part of me.
Yeah,
And like,
exactly.
whether that means like you actually physically help me or you like emotionally support me or you
Mhm.
just like allow me to be who I am, whatever that means, like I
Yeah.
just want to feel like I can show up 100% in this relationship.
And I'm sure you can relate to this having just moved because we have been dating for about 8 months, and, like, time kept going by. I'm like, "This is great." Like, I've been so mentally great this whole time, but at some point, you're gonna have a rough spot, and it's the same thing with when you move somewhere new. Like, when you finally start struggling, you're like, "Oh, they've never seen me like this.
Mhm.
What do I do
Mhm.
now?" Like, this is the first time I've been super depressed in this situation or super down, and they've only known me as, like, Katie from the day the plane lands in London or, like, Megan
Mhm.
from day one of the relationship, and so having to come to terms with, like, "Alright, well, I'm struggling and now they've seen it, so
Mhm.
what do I do?"
Well, something that I was sent recently, it was a quote from Simon Sinek. I'm gonna try to find it because I do not want to butcher it because I got sent it and I was like, "Oh my god, this is exactly what I need." It says, "Asking for help is an act of service. Don't deny the people around you the honor of being there to support you."
I love that.
Like,
Yeah,
wow.
that is so true.
So, as a chronic people pleaser and as someone who never wants to take up space, ask for help, I remind myself, and if this is, the one thing that is actually going to have me ask for help, maybe in the future, it hopefully won't be about another person, but like right now it is. It's like I am giving people the opportunity to be there for me in my life. And like that is an act of vulnerability and, like, they are gonna be really excited to be able to help me, they're gonna be really excited to, like, see a different part of me, like, I
Yeah.
am doing them a favor. And, like,
Yeah.
it's kind of convoluted girl math in my mind, like, me
Girl math
asking
is
for
girl
help
math.
equals other people, you know, it's good for other people, but, like, that's what's working for me right now, so
Yeah, no, I really like that.
going to the topic of today's podcast episode, I'm super excited to talk about discipline, mindset, consistency, all of that around
Yeah.
exercise and running, especially because you have marathon trained, you've like ultra marathon trained, and the discipline and consistency that it takes for you to go do that is absolutely incredible. And I love how you like post about it too, because I see it as a wannabe runner. I mean, okay, I know you say like you are a runner if you go out and you run.
Yeah.
So okay, as
I
a
feel like
baby
I view
novice,
myself as a wannabe runner, so
and I'm like, okay, as a baby novice runner, I am so inspired by your journey of like just training for marathons.
thank you. Yeah, no, I the episode for my podcast I just recorded talks a lot about it, but just saying how, like, me from 10 years ago would look at my year and be like, "Oh my god, like, what how did you do that?" But, like, me
Mhm,
from October is like, "Man, this kinda sucks." Like, I didn't run as far as I wanted to.
mhm.
There's no such thing as running only 34 miles, like, that's insane. That is insanity, and so the
That
fact that
is
my brain is
insane.
like, "You didn't do it." I'm like, "Huh? Yeah, we did actually. We ran really far. That's all that matters."
Yes,
Um,
100%.
yeah, it's been like a whirlwind of a year. Some races went really well. Some I 2 the last 2 I dropped out of, but it's all, like, perspective, like you said, when you're around other people that like, I know someone I follow someone on Instagram, I love his account, it's at @amglaze. He's run
Mhm.
100 miles a week, every week for almost 100 weeks.
I think
That's like
I know
a half
exactly who you're
marathon a
talking about.
day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Can
yeah.
you imagine? Like, and
No, I know.
nope, nope, nope. But I think it's just all perspective, right? If you hang out with all people like that, then you're like, well, I'm not consistent enough and I'm not disciplined enough. This guy's going running at 4 and then also running at 4 p.m. and running every day. And I'm barely running like 10 miles a week. But you might hang out with people who are like, you run a mile?
No,
I can't
exactly.
run. Like,
Exactly. So, you kind of touched on discipline. I want to know what your definition of discipline is and how that differs from motivation.
so for me, if you feel motivated to do something, that's like the fleeting moment of like, wow, that person ran a half marathon. That'd be cool. And then discipline is what comes next, kind of the plan that you make for yourself. So some days, like I mentioned today, it's pouring rain here, but for you, it looks like it's nice and sunny. For me, it's easy to feel motivated to run when it's sunny. I have no plans. But discipline's about making it happen even on days when it's pouring rain or you have work or, the kid's up later than you want. So it's like this balance of like you want motivation, that's the ideal way to run, but some days you're running just on discipline.
Mhm.
Um, and I try not to be like crazy hard on myself either, but that's more with like how do you define consistency?
I was gonna say, I think, something that I've noticed, and we were kind of talking about consistency earlier, is that social media and like the wellness side of influencing defines consistency as doing something every single day. It's like if you
Yeah.
don't do it every single day for a set number of days, like Project 50, 75 hard, you're
Mhm.
failing. But I think
Yeah.
we don't remember that like consistency is doing something a set number of times in a day, in a week, whatever it is,
Yep.
and continuing to do it without fail.
Yeah, and it's intense because, like I said, you'll see people that do crazy consistency things and less crazy than him too. Like there's someone that runs 3 miles every day and she's done it for 5 years, and I'm like, why can't I do that? Like, am I not consistent enough? Do I not have enough discipline? But I think it's just looking at your life and being like, okay, I have all these things going on. How much time can I make for this year? Since we were talking about Strava earlier, Strava
Mhm.
actually has a feature where you can set like a goal per week, but have it be the number of activities rather than the distance.
Mm.
So instead of being like, I want to run 20 miles a week or 30 miles a week, you can just say, hey, I want to run 4 times a week. Doesn't matter how far it is. And so I like that mindset a lot better because it's just more attainable. It's a little easy.
Yeah, I 100% think that the goals of like how much you show up and not necessarily and the amount of effort you put in and not what you do is so much more beneficial and useful. Like when I did Project 50, that was crazy consistency because it was like you have to show up every single day, but it was like okay, it's not telling me that I need to go lift for an hour. It's not telling me that I need to do a 5-mile run every single day.
Yeah,
It's telling
exactly.
me that I just need to show up for 45 minutes in whatever, method that is good for me. And for me, like, I took on yoga, I took on walking,
Yeah.
I took on strength training and running, but, like, it was, like, whatever is good for my body that day. And I
Mhm.
loved how it was just show up. So, okay, speaking about your trail journey, for people who are interested in taking steps towards running, myself included, especially trail running, what's
Yeah.
one piece of advice you would give them?
Um, I had this thought when you were talking earlier about how just like the constant idea of, well, how far can I go? Like if I can do a 5K, can I do a 10K? That is pretty much like how you get sucked into running. Ultras specifically, but if I had an advice for trail running, I mean, this is my advice for all running, but it's just go out there and do it. Like I went for my first trail run in shoes that had no business being on the trail, and
Mhm.
I still walk up every single hill I encounter. Like, that's a hill. I'm power hiking. It's walking.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
just, like, have the patience with yourself to, like, walk or take snack breaks. I have a friend that just got into running, and she didn't even know if she could go a mile, so I said, "Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna meet at the greenway, we're gonna run until you wanna walk, and then we'll walk. And then when you feel like running, then we'll run. And then we'll walk." And her mile time ended up being 11:30. I'm like, "Madison, see,
That's
like,
really good.
you're doing fantastic. Like, you just need
Yeah.
to get outside of the box." And so she was saying she wants to train for a 5K in March. I'm like, "If you can already do that, like, think bigger, don't limit yourself, but just start. Just show up for a run, like, bring whatever little incentive you need. For me, it's Sour Patch Kids and a
Mm.
guided run from Nike Run Club app, and I'm
Mhm.
set. But, like, find something that makes it fun and just show up and try not to stress about, like, the numbers and the distance and all the
Yeah.
gadgets.
I love that, and I think I needed to hear that too because I coming from, Hong Kong, I moved here is in California, I moved here for high school. Everyone's talking about a mile time. Everyone's talking about needing to run a mile in less than 10 minutes. And I don't think I've ever run a mile in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And that, like, the numbers and the expectations of what a run looks like has freaked me out and has kind of, like, deterred me from showing up at all, and so I was really saying, like, this is the year where I'm, like, gonna start trying things and, like, letting myself fail and also fail publicly, but also being like, "Hey, I'm trying something that I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to be a runner."
Yeah. That's so exciting. I love that because I think a lot of people will look at, like I grew up, my dad has always run marathons, not always, but probably since I was 8 or 9, like he's run a marathon every year. And I would look and be like, wow, that's so cool. Like, I wish I could do that. And I feel like we've all seen something that kind of gets us thinking like that. Like, oh, I wish I could do a half, or I wish I could do a marathon, but one day it just clicks, like, I can. I literally can.
Mhm.
I just need to run. Like, I don't need to have this crazy plan or, you know, a shoe rotation or all these other things. I think it's about, like, finding one thing to focus on that makes you realize I can do it, and then kinda tuning everything else out because it just turns into a comparison game, like you said. Everyone's like, "Well, what's your mile time?" And how fast are you gonna run it? And like, you know, the longer I run, the slower I get. So if people are like, well,
Mhm.
what's your half marathon time? Is it sub 2 hours? I'm like, absolutely not. I'm there to have fun. I dress up when I run. I put on skirts and jewelry. Like it's
Mhm.
just about finding the right like motivation for it too.
And it truly is like whatever gets you out of the house to go for a run is what you should do. For me, like my new Hokas, I'm really
Yes.
excited about
No,
them.
exactly.
I woke up this morning, I was like, "Oh my god, my whole body hurts." But I'm gonna go run because I wanna try out my new Hokas. And I
Yeah,
ran
exciting.
1.75 miles, and they were the most painful 1.75 miles of my life. I think it was like averaging about 12 minutes a mile. Um, it was really tough out there, but I was proud of myself. I was like, "Hey, you showed up, you laced your shoes up, and that's all that matters.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter how
exactly.
far, doesn't matter how fast, you're
So you did what I'm
practicing."
probably gonna do after we record this, because I also ran 6 miles yesterday, and my whole body also hurts today, and I'm like, "But I just wanna, like, get a little run in, like, just a
Mhm,
baby one," so I will probably head down to the treadmill and do the
mhm.
same thing, but that's, like, the fun thing about running is if you have a really good run, you're like, "That was awesome. I wanna do that again." But if you have a really terrible run, you're like, "Oh, that was really bad, like, I need to run again so I can redeem
Yes,
it." Like, it
yes.
works both ways, which is crazy.
I get it now. I used to sorry about this, like, I used to hate on runners being like, "I don't get it." Like, I
Oh,
simply don't
100%, I
get
did the
it.
same thing.
And it's just like, the girls who get it, and now I think I get it. I hit that runner's high at about 3.5 miles, and I literally was on my run, and I laughed at myself, and I was like, "I have been stopping myself at, 3.1, at a 5K, and I hit my runner's high at 3.5." So
Yeah,
what does that say about me? Like, it was my mindset and my
yeah.
limiting beliefs that, like, was making it running so hard for me.
And also, I think everyone's meant to do different things because 'cause you'll definitely, like, once someone becomes a runner, you can still meet people that have a terrible mindset, but yet are doing the same thing, you know, like, at a 100-mile race, for example, which is insane also that people can
Mhm,
even run that far, cannot fathom that. But I've been to several 100-mile races, and you have some people that are very positive, and, you know, you'll hear the motto, like, "1 foot in front of the other, I'm gonna keep going," and then other people spend the whole race like, "Well, what's my mile time for that last mile?" You can't do that
mhm,
for 100 miles. You just can't do that. And so I think it's important to, like, maintain a healthy mindset even once you start running because 'cause you'll meet people all over the spectrum, and, like, for me, I realized that I feel warmed up and ready to go after 3 miles, so maybe I shouldn't be trying to sprint and run fast like I was trying to, because 'cause I'm
mhm,
not good at it. I think everyone can run, but everyone's meant to run different things, and if I just try and sprint around a track, I can't do it. I need 30 minutes to kind of feel warmed up. That's when I was like, "Oh, maybe I should run longer distances. Maybe
mhm.
I'd actually be good at running longer distances."
Speaking about kind of discipline, consistency, I wanna talk a little bit about rest, especially knowing because 'cause I've followed
That
your
no.
stories very closely about, like, after you've had a lot of injuries with your running, and after you kind of did that really big race, you had to take a lot more rest than you had anticipated.
Yep.
Can you talk me through how that felt, what that means to you?
Yeah, so I am someone you heard me just say as a joke, like, "What's rest?" Like, that's kind of the joke amongst
Mhm,
my friends is Megan doesn't know how to chill. Like, I launched my whole podcast during finals week because I had so much less homework. Rather than study and work on my finals, I was like, "I should fill this time with something." I don't like to rest, which I think is how I'm able to balance everything. If I'm resting, I'm like, "Well, what should I be doing?" Like, if I'm resting,
mhm,
I should vacuum. I should cook something. I'm not a person who likes rest. But your body needs rest, whether your mind wants it or not. Like your body just cannot go, go, go all the time. You can build up endurance, but you can't just have it overnight. And so after my first 50K, I had trained for it. I had worked with a coach the whole time. And so I felt like very physically prepared. And the week after, I hurt in the weirdest places that I would have imagined. Like my legs were fine, but the rest of my body was not okay. I have this thing that happens after like long distance races where my throat will swell up and I can't even eat afterwards. Like it hurts to swallow and eat food. And I didn't really know that that was a thing. My coach was like, "Yeah, that makes sense. Like you're heavy breathing for 9 hours." I'm like, yeah, I guess, but like I just want Taco Bell and now I can't even eat Taco Bell. So I think it's knowing that like no matter how well you train, like you're gonna need rest. It's just how it goes. And so with this past race, I ended up dropping out of the race at a 50K and I was like, okay, I've done 2 of those this year. I should need about a week off and then I'll start running again. I was signed up for a half marathon 2 weeks after this 50K. I was
Oh
like,
my
it'll be
God.
fine. Like I'll just rest for a week, run a few times, and then do a half marathon. And my coach is just like, Megan, please, like, please don't do that. And I'm like, yeah, no, it'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even make it a week. I lied. I said I waited a week. I waited 4 days. The race was on Saturday. And then on Thursday, I was like, let's go running. My boyfriend's like, okay. 2 miles, the most painful 2 miles of my life because my body just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't ready. And so the 2 miles didn't go good. And I was like, well, I'll run again tomorrow and maybe that'll be better. So I ran 4 miles the next day, doubled the run. I don't know why. Again, dumb idea. And I was like, that 4 miles really hurt. Let me do it again the next day. And then that's when I was like, okay, this is not working. Like, I can't just run through this. I tried to run 3 days in a row. Clearly, I need more rest. And so I was good for like a week with that. Like, okay, I need rest. I ran a race. Like, December will be my
Mm-hmm.
month of rest. That's what I told myself. But as you mentioned, I started a run streak in December. So clearly there's some dissonance there. But I think it's just really hard to accept that like your body has limits because you tell yourself the whole training cycle, like, I have no limits. I can do whatever I want. And then the race is done. And that's when you have to be like, okay, just kidding. I've met my limit and now I need to rest. Like, you can't live in that peak performance forever. And a huge thing with training for like a half marathon or a marathon is you kind of build, you peak, and then you taper a little bit before the race, and then you
Mm-hmm.
race, and then you rest. And you can't live in that peak fitness forever. Like, I've run, like a PR, for example, like my 5K PR, I'm blanking on it right now, but like I can't just go run that any day of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Can't be able to run that every day of the year. It's just not sustainable. You'd be burnt out and depressed. And so it's been a long month of trying to just accept that, like, I kind of ran my body into the ground this year. That's okay. Like, I did lots of cool new things. I did a triathlon too, which was like really unexpected and
Oh my
completely.
God, yeah. That's crazy. Wait, remind me what a triathlon is. I know it's the swim, run, bike, but like how long for each?
So they're all different distances. I did a really short one, mainly
Okay.
because I call it a dinosaur bike. It's like a mountain bike, and I used it on a road race. But
Okay.
it was like a 500-meter swim, I think a 7-mile bike ride, and a 2-mile run.
Okay,
And so,
500-meter swim is a lot of swimming. Let's not like that is a lot. That's
so
a very long
I
distance.
should have mentioned this at the beginning. I grew up a competitive swimmer. I was never a runner. So I
Okay.
can swim for like an hour plus, no problem. And I can run for hours, but cycling, I would die in Soul Cycle. When I'm on the Peloton and they're like, get out of the seat, I'm like, no, absolutely.
That's
We're
so
turning down the
funny.
resistance. This is lame. So the swim and the run part, I was like, I got
Okay.
this. This is the bike. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to ride 7 miles on the road. But yeah,
Oh,
obviously that's hard on my body too. And so now at the end of the year, I'm like, okay, I think rather than being like, I failed my last 2 races, I need to just accept that there were lots of good things and lots of bad things. And the
100%.
rest for me has meant lots of walking, going to lots of physical therapy. I work with my physical therapist, so it's very easy to like check in and see how things are doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is the first time I'm not signed up for a race that's within the next 2 months. And I'm just like,
One of the community questions is how do you find the right exercises for you and how long does that usually take? And you kind of mentioned, you don't like biking. Talk me
I'm
through
trying to learn to like biking.
maybe,
Yeah,
okay, maybe you'd like Soul Cycle. Like it's a
probably.
little bit rogue, but it's like loud music blasting. You're riding
Yeah,
to the
no, I feel
beat.
like I'd like it. I looked into it, and the nearest place here is an hour away. So I was super bummed. I was like, I'll have to do it on vacation. But in
Yes.
terms of like finding the right type of exercise, I was the kid in high school that did something for a year and then did something different the next year, and then
Okay.
something different the next year. Like, I never could find anything that would stick. And so then I was like, well, I'm not legit. Like, I'm not a real swimmer because I didn't swim all 4 years in high school. I'm not a real runner because I didn't run all 4 years in high school. And I can't weight lift. I don't know what I'm doing. But the older
Yeah, but
you
like
get, the more
what
you're like,
is a real athlete
yeah, no, the
anyway?
older you get, you're like, no one cares. Like, I can go into the gym and do whatever I want, and no one's gonna think more than 2 seconds about it. Like, everyone feels that way starting
Hmm.
anything new. And so with the triathlon, for example, that's something I've always said, like, I grew up a competitive swimmer and now I run, but I can't bike. And that's been like the end of
Hmm.
conversation. I was like, I can't bike. And to be fair, biking I think is a little more scary than running. Like you're biking on the road with cars, and where I live, there's not really like there's no bike lanes. It's
Mhm. Very.
an
Yeah.
entry bike is like $1,000, which I do not have. Like you hear the joke that running's not expensive, and we're all like, yeah, it is, but cycling is like actually just indisputably expensive.
Right.
And so that's kind of been the conversation in my head. I like to swim, I like to run, but biking. And I've just ended it there. And then in July of this year, I ran 173 miles throughout the month of July, which
Wow.
broke me. We got to August and I was like, I don't want to run anymore. My coach is like, your biggest races of the year are coming up. What do you mean you don't want to run anymore?
Mhm. Mhm.
That's when I kind of learned, I'm never doing that again. I don't want to run that much again. But I needed a break. So I just took a complete week off. And I do this once every few months. I tell my coach it's going rogue. And normally when I go rogue, I'll like ignore his training plan and just on a whim, like run a marathon with a friend or like drive to a mountain that I was not supposed to, that's like way steeper. So
Mhm.
that going rogue was I didn't do any of the training he gave me for like a week. And I was at work and talking to a patient who does triathlons, and they're like, "You should totally do one. There's one in 2 days. Like, you should just sign up and do it." I'm like, "You are unhinged." And my PT is watching me from across the room, like my PT who has treated my injuries and knows how I think. And they're just looking at me like this. I'm like, I mean, it's insane, right? Like, I
Mhm.
can't do that. I don't have a bike. She's like, "Yeah, you do. There's one in your garage." I'm like, "Okay, it's a mountain bike. Like, it's my dad's mountain bike. I can't use that." She's like,
Mhm.
"Well, why not?" I'm like, "Well, because she's like, yeah, you can. Like, she just kind of kept arguing with me, but in a productive way, because it made me see that, like, this thing I've always wanted to do, kind of like you with running. Like, I've always
Mhm.
wanted to do a triathlon, but I'm constantly like, I can't, I can't, I can't. So I signed up with 2 days' notice and I threw some stuff together. I didn't have like a tri suit. I was pulling on my Hokas over my wet socks. Like, it was just, there were a lot of things that went very wrong. My transition time was longer than my swim time total. Like I just did not know what I was doing. But it was awesome. And I had a great time and it
But that's how
was
you learn.
pretty much. And so I think it's just when you're exploring with different forms of exercise, just give yourself permission to be an idiot or to look dumb or not know what you're doing. Like no one just shows up to an Ironman, like the super, super long triathlons with everything figured out.
Mhm.
Just like no one shows up to a marathon, like knowing all of it of their first try. Like you all have your first marathon, your first 5K, and
Mhm.
they're all just different than the others. That's okay.
Yeah, I love that, and definitely, like, just take the pressure off of yourself. If me running can show you anything, is like, don't be afraid to laugh at yourself, don't be afraid to be seen trying, don't be afraid to
Yeah.
fail, and fail in a big way too, like, life is too short to gaslight yourself out of doing the things that you
Oh,
wanna do.
100%. And yeah, I think you said like even just like laughing at yourself too and being like, I cannot believe I messed up in that big way. I don't know if I said this on my podcast episode, but like the most recent race that I just ran,
Mhm.
there's no TMI on this podcast, right? I had to
No.
pee so bad. I went to the side of the trail and peed and got it on my shoe. And in those moments, you have to just like laugh at yourself and be like, why am I doing this? Like
Honestly, that's not even as
it's just
TMI as
so
I thought it
funny.
was gonna
Like,
be.
and you hear more like that the more you run, but I like that's kind of what running has done for me is you just learn to take things less seriously. Like you'll hear all sorts of stories of people that do half marathons and marathons of like just embarrassing bathroom things or
Mhm.
something not sitting right with your stomach or like you want to go for a run and realize all your clothes are dirty, so you wear something that looks ridiculous. Like it's just like no one cares. You could sit on the sidelines of a half marathon and watch everyone running, and you'll see people of all heights, of all shapes and weights, in all different clothes with all different shoes. And you could sit there and try and be like, that person has good shoes, that person doesn't, that person has a fancy watch, that, but they all finish. Like for
Mhm.
the most part, like they're all gonna finish and run the race. So it doesn't, you don't have to take it so seriously.
I don't know, sometimes we judge ourselves out of doing the things that we wanna do. That's me with running, I'm like, "I don't have the right shoes, I don't have the right equipment," but I'm like, "No, no, no," like, it doesn't matter if I run a mile, it doesn't matter if I run 6, I'm still very like, I can't believe I ran 6 miles
That's
yesterday.
crazy. That is so awesome.
It just like it's about showing up, it's about doing the things, and I think honestly, in terms of like an actionable step, give yourself a month of doing something consistently, like maybe 3, 4 times a week,
Hmm.
or whatever that means to you if you're starting from scratch, maybe not that much, but that's how I got into weightlifting was like, I decided that I wanted to try, and I went and I looked really stupid for like a year and I didn't know what I was doing. My form was awful, but I was also like posting videos about it too, and no one was correcting me.
I
So
love
that
that.
really like no one cares. No
Yeah.
one cares how you show up. No one cares when you show up. You're
And
never
also,
too
the
late.
people that do care are probably wrong. Because the first time I went to a gym as a runner, I'm like, "What are all these people doing in their Converse? They're stupid." 'Cause you would never run in those, right? So I'm trying
Yeah,
to teach them from, like, a running mindset,
but
but
now
now
you get it. You get
I don't
it.
weightlift a lot, but I know enough about it to be like, "Oh, it's because 'cause they're flat." Like, that's why
Yes.
people are barefoot or in Converse. Like, you don't wanna if you wore a Hoka, like, can you imagine wearing that big Hoka or
Oh,
Cloud Monster
you
weightlifting?
would like you
Terrible
would
idea. So anyone that is judging you is
roll your
probably
ankle.
wrong. Like,
Yes.
yeah, you know, if you get it, you get it. And so the people that get it are gonna get you, and they're not gonna judge you for what you're doing.
And also that, the quote that I'm completely gonna butcher right now is like, "The people doing better than you would never make fun of you because they were
Yes.
once, in
Yeah,
your
I've heard that
shoes."
quote.
And it's like, I feel the same way, like, I think that I'm probably, like, an intermediate, weightlifter, right? I don't like to do the competitive lifts, but I know enough to know what a good form is. I'm never gonna go into a gym and be like, "Oh, that person looks stupid." Like,
Right?
you
Yeah.
can definitely okay, you see that that person is new and they're trying and, like, maybe you're gonna give them some good tips. What I love about the gym community, that is probably the same with the running community, is people will just give you advice, not because they're trying to, be mean and, like, belittle you, but because they're like, "I know more. I see that you need help because you look like a beginner.
Yeah.
Would you mind if I told you how to fix your form? Or would you mind if I told you this and that?" And they don't come from a place of, like, wanting to
You're
make you
doing this
feel
wrong.
bad.
Yeah.
Exactly, and I think there's this big, misconception. I think that was the last question I wanted to end on was, well, it's misconceptions with discipline and exercise, but there is a big misconception that, like, the people who are, like, top peak performance of their field is gonna, like, make fun of you or judge you, and I think for me, when I see someone who like, know is a beginner in the gym, and it's like the feeling I get is proud. Like,
Yeah,
I'm
you,
like,
like, wanna help them. I
"Yeah,
never as a runner, if someone's like, "I wanna start running," but, like, my first mile was 15 minutes, and I actually walked almost all of it, and I did it in Crocs. I would never be like, "Oh my gosh, like, don't even tell me that, that's so stupid." I'd be like,
mhm."
"That's awesome that you're trying, like, that is so great, like, it's all up from here, you're doing awesome." Um, I think people need to remember that, like you said, like, the elites or people that are really, really good aren't gonna judge you, they're gonna want to help you and encourage you, and we've all been there, like, we were all beginners at some point, even, the great Olympians, they didn't just pop out of the womb running a 450 mile, like, it takes training and hard work, and once people see that, they wanna help other people do the same thing.
There, I feel like, is a very big barrier, mental barrier to starting any exercise of, like, I don't know, you know, what I was telling about, like, I don't know what an interval run is, I don't know what, like,
Yeah,
marathon pace runs, like, I don't
fartlek or any of the other
right,
stuff,
I don't
yeah.
understand what a recovery run is, like, I don't understand what a zone 2 means, so
I
there's this
still don't know what
big
that means.
right? But there's this big mental barrier that you can, like, use to kind of keep yourself from trying something new where you're like, "I don't really know what RDL means when I'm lifting, so I'm just not
Mhm.
going to like, I don't care enough to learn either, so I'm just not going to." And, like, if that's what you wanna do, that's totally fine, but that's how I gaslit myself out of running for 23 years. So now I'm gonna try to gaslight myself into running by
Yes, that looks
realizing that,
great.
it's like you don't need to know everything. No one expects you to know everything, and you're gonna kind of learn as you go. Right now, what I'm trying to do is just build up the habit of exercise of, like, running and exercising and, like,
Yeah.
wanting to run, and so, obviously, right now, talking about discipline and motivation, I'm motivated to run. I just got new shoes, like, I'm in
Yeah,
a
it's
place where it's really
sunny, you're in
sunny. It's
California,
right,
yeah.
like, it's gorgeous, I have trails, but I know that when I go back to London, it's not gonna be like that, and that's where discipline is gonna kick in of being like, "Okay, you said that you're gonna be a runner," and it's not that, you know, you don't have to do something you don't wanna do, because if you don't wanna run, period, and you just have wanted to have, like, a 2-week stint of running, totally fine as well.
Yeah,
But, like,
100%.
this is something that you've always wanted to do, so let's not let external factors like the weather and, like, being in a
Mhm.
city and, like, not being familiar with these things, like, make you not do and not try.
Yes.
Well, Megan, thank you so much for being on the podcast, for coming on, sharing your expertise.
Of course, thanks so much for having me, it's been so fun.
It has been so lovely and so inspired. I mean, I just went for a run, so, like, I'm gonna stop myself, but, like, so inspired to go out and, like,
Woohoo, yeah, don't go
run
running
even
after
more.
this, but maybe tomorrow.
No, no, I'm gonna go do yoga or something, like, really active recovery and rest, but You have inspired me for a very long time, and so honestly, I'm very excited that you had reached out, and now that we're here and we did that. So
I know, it's so fun.
I want to give you 30 seconds to plug whatever you want to plug, whether that be your
Okay.
Instagram, podcast, any other thing. The time is yours.
Thank you. All right. So yeah, if any of you guys want to see more of my running journey, you can follow me at miles.with.megan on Instagram. I do start training for my next 50K in January. So right now it's been a lot of like I'm resting content, but I'll start again in January. And then my podcast is Just Another Mile. It's available on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. So if you like what I had to say today and we're like, I want another hour of that, that's where you can find more. So, yeah, thanks again for having me. It's been so fun.
Perfect. I will leave all of your links down below as well. So if you want to check Megan out, click on any of the links in the description. Thank you for listening to another episode of Solidarity on the Bench with KDU. If you enjoyed this podcast or want to submit a question for future guests, you can follow the podcast Instagram at SolidarityPod or follow the host at katie.eu. See you next Tuesday.